The following video may contain spoilers. Just a little background about why I decided to do this list. I'm in my 40s, and every time a conversation comes up about great directors, I feel like it's the same names over and over again: Scorsese, Kubrick, Spielberg. My favorite director of all time is Martin Scorsese, so I'm also part of the herd. And I feel like there was a huge period where every hot new director that came out, I just wasn't a big fan of. I'm thinking of guys that emerged in the 90s, like Quentin Tarantino, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Wes Anderson. They just never matched up to the directors I grew up with. So the directors I was a really big fan of, they just stayed the same year after year after year. I recently came to the realization that there's a lot of directors that have carved quite a career for themselves in the past 20 years, and that I'm a huge fan of these directors that I didn't grow up worshiping. So I decided to make a list of my favorites. Here's that list, the top 10 directors that either began their careers or blew up since the year 2000. At number 10, Ryan Coogler. His first film was a solid independent film, Fruitvale Station, in 2013. He follows that up with the excellent Creed, which had really well-directed boxing scenes. And then, of course, he delivers his masterpiece, Black Panther. He's also an extremely gifted writer. Michael B. Jordan's Eric Killmonger character is clearly the best written villain in the entire MCU. How Michael B. Jordan was not nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role in this film is still completely baffling. And Ryan Coogler is only 34 years old. I feel like this guy can do anything. After the Black Panther sequel, who knows what he'll do? He could go back and do smaller dramas or take over another huge Hollywood franchise. The sky's the limit for Coogler. At number 9, another Rian Johnson. I know that the internet hates this guy because of The Last Jedi, and I understand the arguments against it. I know that Star Wars fans are so knowledgeable about this stuff that they have very specific expectations about what they want from a Star Wars movie, so I can understand the arguments against some of the elements of the screenplay, but to me, his directing talent is indisputable. The sequence that stands out is that lightsaber battle between Kylo Ren and Rey and all of the Promethean guards. The red-on-red production design, the way the slow-mo starts the battle scene, the way the Snoke death was edited, and that shot where Daisy Ridley's hand reaches up and grabs the lightsaber. This was such an exhilarating scene, but we just can't talk about Last Jedi alone. He has Looper, a brilliant sci-fi time travel movie, and one of the best films of last year, Knives Out. Johnson is just a master storyteller, a great writer, and a director who really speaks the language of cinema well. At number 8, Damien Chazelle. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge Scorsese fan, and my top 3 favorite films for a large chunk of my life were Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas. I really thought those 3 films would always be at the top of my list, but in December of 2016, I watched a film called La La Land. And I went to the theater and watched it again. And I went to the theater and watched it a third time. And I watched it in various formats at home about 4 more times, most recently about a month ago. And basically I came to the realization that this was my new favorite film of all time. I feel like the vision Damien Chazelle had in his head was almost perfectly realized. You can see his vision is so clear and evident throughout every frame of this film. Especially the end sequence where Ryan Gosling reimagines his entire life with Emma Stone. The shot composition and editing in that sequence is just cinematic perfection. And before La La Land, he had another great film, the emotionally brutal Whiplash, with J.K. Simmons as one of the greatest villain characters of all time. I felt like First Man was a misstep for him, but hopefully Chazelle can bounce back with his next film. I believe it's another musical, this time with Emma Stone and Brad Pitt. At number 7, Sofia Coppola. There are tons of great female directors emerging right now, but Sofia Coppola has always been my favorite. She captures verisimilitude just as good as any director working today. I know she won the Oscar for Lost in Translation, which is a good film, but I actually think it's the weakest film in her filmography. She directed a little-seen film called Somewhere, where Stephen Dorff plays a famous LA actor trying to forge a relationship with his daughter. Every shot of this film is so beautiful, so magnificently crafted, and the film is also extremely profound about not living this superficial, self-centered life and living your life for other people for a change, especially if you're a Hollywood big shot. And every other film of hers is also great. In my opinion, she's never made a bad one. Virgin Suicides, Marie Antoinette, The Beguiled. As I mentioned, she captures verisimilitude very well, but also has a great flair for cinematic style. I'm thinking about the scene in Marie Antoinette set to the 80s song I Want Candy, where we see all the desserts that Kirsten Dunst is gorging on. Her next film is a reunion with Bill Murray called On the Rocks, set in New York, and I cannot wait for that one. At number 6, Denis Villeneuve. This director just has it all. He's a master craftsman with his trademark dark and shadowy cinematography style. Of course, it helps to have cinematographers like Roger Deakins and Bradford Young. And he's an inventive storyteller. I'm just remembering the narrative sleight of hand in his masterpiece Sicario, as we thought Emily Blunt was the protagonist, but it was really Benicio del Toro all along. Sicario was clearly the best film of 2015. He follows that up with another great film, Arrival, and we're all waiting for his Dune reboot. Great things are to come for this amazing filmmaker. At number 5, Yorgos Lanthimos. I was a huge fan of The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, but those films are an exercise in cinematography and mood over storytelling. They're still great films, don't get me wrong, but I thought to myself, if this guy gets a really good story, it's going to be a total grand slam. And then The Favorite comes out, easily one of the top 10 films of that year. We get his stunning shot composition and also an unusual period drama about a lesbian romantic triangle. He's also really great at capturing dark humor, which is a staple of many of his films. I feel like a lot of modern filmmakers are just getting away from really meticulous shot composition, but with Lanthimos, it's front and center, and he's one of the best craftsmen working today. At number 4, Steve McQueen. 2013's 12 Years a Slave was the best film of that year. Like Lanthimos, McQueen is a master of shot composition. In my opinion, he's the best shot composition filmmaker working today. Almost every shot of his films could be a still photograph in a museum. And his first film, Hunger, was another masterpiece. This is a director that cares more about having amazing individual scenes and cinematic moments than just your traditional narrative storytelling. He's experimental and avant-garde at times, but his films are never boring. The great shot composition and photography just makes the experiences so exhilarating. I felt like his last film, Widows, was more of a minor work. 12 Years a Slave won a bunch of Oscars, and deservedly so, but I'm hoping McQueen doesn't rest on his laurels after the big Oscar wins, which happens to so many directors and actors. Let's hope he gets back to form with his next film. At number 3, Park Chan-wook. He just keeps turning out one masterpiece after another. The Vengeance trilogy, which includes the incredible Oldboy, Thirst, The Handmaiden, even the not-so-well-received 2006 release I'm a Cyborg But That's Okay was actually my favorite film of that year, was number 1 on my top 10 list. Park is clearly a huge cinephile, and it's evident in every shot of his work. He explores dark and violent themes which are always appealing to cinephiles. He's clearly a master director, and I can totally see him pulling off a Bong Joon-ho and winning tons of international awards with the film at some point in his future. At number 2, Alfonso Cuarón. Now, Cuarón has a few credits in the 90s, but I'm including him on this list because his first real masterpiece came in 2001, Y tu mamá también. Both this film and Roma were my favorite films the years they were released. He's a technically brilliant director, as we see from all his amazing long takes like in Children of Men and Gravity. But at the heart of his filmmaking is the theme of empathy. Y tu mamá también is a coming-of-age story with two wild, sex-crazed young boys who learn empathy in such a stark, brutal way. And then we go to Roma as we see things through the eyes of the housekeeper of a wealthy family. We see her life as a three-dimensional character, not that person in the background. She's placed front and center ahead of the rich people's quote-unquote more important lives. Cuarón is one of the great directors working today, and every time he delivers a film, it feels like a huge event. And at number 1, it's probably no surprise to true film lovers, Bong Joon-ho. This is the second Korean director in my top 3. Korea is just one of the best countries for cinema and has been for a long time now. He's another director that has never made a bad film. Memories of Murder, The Host, Mother, Snowpiercer, Okja, and the best of them all, Parasite. He gives painstakingly meticulous attention to his craft, as evident in these Parasite storyboards alone. Other than his technical brilliance, his films are so thematically rich. The Host is a sci-fi monster movie, but sneaks in a subtle message about pollution and the environment. Snowpiercer and Parasite deal with the divisions between the rich and the poor in such clever ways. And Okja is about animal cruelty and speciesism. Bong Joon-ho is a visionary filmmaker and, in my opinion, the most exciting working in movies today. There's my top 10 list for the best directors post-2000. So many of us in our 40s or older continue to worship the film school brats like Scorsese and Spielberg, but over the last 20 years, there have been many filmmakers that have been carving out quite amazing filmographies, and they're coming from many different countries and backgrounds. Let's hope they continue to influence and inspire future generations of artists for years to come.